Hello and welcome back to I'm Not Afraid of the Exam. The exam's afraid of me. Yesterday, you were given our very first question, and we're going to take a look at that today. So let's see how you did. So, the way that I tend to approach all my problems, and you get a sense of this, you watched my video from yesterday, is that I treat mathematics as a language. Remember, we call it the language of love. So, what we want to do is we want to find out where the key word lies in every single problem because that key word is always going to have the same meaning regardless of what type of question. So if we know every time we see the key word we should do the same thing, that's always going to get us started. So on this very first example, the key word is average rate of change. If we go back and we take a look, the question asks, find the average rate of change of f of x equals x cubed minus 5x plus 2 on an interval from -2 to 5. So again, we're looking for that keyword. That keyword is average rate of change. Now, you're probably familiar with this from your previous classes, but what I want you to think every single time you hear average rate of change, I want you just to think of it as a 2-point slope. That's all it means, okay? It's a 2-point slope. Now, there are several ways to write that down. That's kind of the English way of writing it down. We can make this a little more mathematical. In other words, use the language of love a little bit more. We could refer to this as delta y over delta x, which I'm sure you guys all know as rise over run. Now, to take that one step further, we also know that's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. You've seen this since Algebra 1. You've been doing this your whole lives, okay? So there's nothing really new going on here. It's just you recognizing that when they say average rate of change, you need to find 2 points and then use those 2 points to find the slope. So in the problem that we're given, where are the points going to come from? Well, this is where the interval is going to come in every single time on this problem, okay? You've got an interval. You're saying that your function starts at x equals -2, ends at 5. You're trying to find how that function changes from the beginning, -2, to the end, 5. So what you want to do is you want to find -2 as your starting point and 5 as your ending point. Problem is, that's easy enough to say that the x equals -2 and then the x equals 5, but we've still got to find out what the y value is. So now this is where more mathematical notation comes in, more language of love. We are given right here this notation, okay? F of x. F of x is a function. We love functions in calculus. What the job of a function is basically this, to get plugged into. We give it an input, and then that function gives us a rule to follow to give us an output. So what we've got here is a function defined by x cubed minus 5x plus 2. Now, one of the things I always have my students do, okay, is whenever they hear the word plug in, and that's another one of the key words that we want to talk about today, okay? Plug in my class, it always means to do something called use somethings. Now, I know that's not going to make a whole lot of sense to you right now. You have no idea what I'm talking about. So let me be clear. A something is nothing more than a placeholder. In the function we've got f of x. Well, we're plugging in for the x. So I'm going to use an empty set of parentheses as my something. So I'm going to do f of something equals, and then I'm going to fall down the line everywhere I see an x, I'm going to put the placeholder. So f of something equals something cubed minus 5 times something plus 2. And that's the way this function gets plugged into. I know using these something seems very basic to you. Okay, I get that. But you've got to understand that I kind of know where we're going. And if we get used to the idea of using somethings now, I promise you it's going to pay off later on. So remember, we want to plug in. So what are we plugging in? We've got to find the y values that go with these inputs. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to plug in -2 everywhere. And then we're going to find out what f of -2 is. Now, if you work that all out, we're going to get -8 plus 10 plus 2. That's going to give us a value of 4. Okay, we'll leave the calculations to you. We're now going to do the same thing to find our endpoint. Okay, so our endpoint is at 5. So we're going to take that value and we're going to plug in everywhere inside of our somethings. That's going to give us 125 minus 25 plus 2. That's going to give us a value of 102. So what we're able to do is we're able to come up with the 2 points. Now remember, the key word here is average rate of change. You're all super familiar with that, delta y over delta x. The key is knowing that that average rate of change means find your 2 points. So whenever you're doing an average rate of change, the 2 points you use are always the endpoints of the interval. Okay, so always set that up. Now, let's talk AP Calculus and what they're going to be looking for on the exam. You're going to have to show something called a difference quotient. Now, I know we could probably go and subtract these in our heads and get the answer, but when you're doing a problem on the AP exam, especially the free response, they're looking for your work to justify your answer. So you've got to use something called the difference quotient. Now, you're familiar with the difference quotient as y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And in Algebra 1, that's exactly what we use. When we graduate to calculus, though, we want to start using better notation, and that means using function notation. So one thing to keep in mind is that all intervals in calculus are generally called the interval from the starting point A to the ending point B. Okay, so whenever we've got an interval, we like to use A and B as our start and our end. After that, when you want to find the y values that go with that, you're going to find that A is the first x value. How do we get the y value? Well, we're going to plug into f of something. So we're going to get A, f of A. Likewise, the second point, B is the x value. How do we find the y value? We're going to plug into our function. So we're going to get f of B. So those are going to be our 2 points. If we rewrite the difference quotient, this guy right here, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, using this notation, who is our second value? Who's our second y value? Well, our second y value is f of b. So there's y2. Now we're going to go minus. Who's our first y value? Well, that's f of a. So there's y2 minus y1. And now let's do over x2 minus x1. So let's get x2. That's our second x value. That's b. And then our second y value, I'm sorry, our first x value, that's going to be a. So what we've done now is we've created kind of the grown-up math way of saying the average rate of change. But the beauty of this is that it's something you've always known. You're just using different language to describe it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go find the average rate of change for this example. So let's get that screen back up here. Here we go. We left off, we knew that our 2 points were -2, 4, and 5, 102. So I'm going to copy these guys. I'm going to bring them down here and get this set up. So what I want to do is I want to show my work. I want the reader on the AP exam to be very comfortable and confident that I know what I'm doing. So I'm going to start off by saying f of b. Well, f of b in our case was f of 5 minus f of -2. There's our y2 minus y1. And now it's going to be over 5 minus -2. By doing this, we're framing for the reader what we're doing. Now we're just going to go and show our calculations. We're going to do that f of 5 was 102. Okay, so that was equal to 102 minus f of -2, which was 4. And again, on the bottom, we've got that 5 minus -2. So from here, we're just going to do our computations. We're going to get 98 over 7. And 98 over 7 is going to go and reduce down to 14. So we can say that our final answer, the average rate of change in this function over our interval from -2 to 5 is 14. So again, some things that I want you to remember, okay? We're going to be talking about keywords all throughout the year. In this particular example, the keywords that we came up with were average rate of change, which I want you to always remember, just 2 point slope. Every time you hear it, 2 point slope. And then the language of love way you're going to say that, um, f of b minus f of a over b minus a. Along with that, we talked about plugging into our functions. Whenever you plug into a function, I want you to use those parentheses. I want you to show where you're plugging in, and we're going to call those somethings. Okay. If you can take those first two keywords, we can build on those as this year goes on, and you're going to have a great time taking that AP exam in May.